I had the great honor of being selected a 2017 National Geographic Grosvenor Teacher Fellow. National Geographic sent me, courtesy of Lindblad Expeditions, to Svalbard, Greenland, and Iceland this past July. I got to sail around the top of the world on the ship, the National Geographic Explorer, to explore the Arctic and experience it and bring that back to my teaching and my community. And oh gosh, what an experience it was. I saw animals that I've only ever seen in zoos or on TV, wild and free. Imagine seeing a polar bear in the wild. I saw 2 of them. I saw reindeer, an Arctic fox, walruses, whales, beluga whales, humpback whales, puffins. They're so cute. Oh gosh. I saw horned larks, these little brown birds that we have here in South Dakota during the winter. I didn't know that they summered in the Arctic. As an earth science educator, I was thrilled to see icebergs. They glow blue. Massive, towering glaciers. I saw some of those. I walked on moss, so spongy, it was like walking on memory foam. I experienced 24-hour daylight where the sun never set. It never got dark, not even close. I watched a glacier calve, and that's where the facing edge, part of it drops off into the sea. And we were far enough away that I saw it fall in silence, this deep rumble reaching us a few moments later. I talked to people who have worked in the Arctic for decades and heard how the sea ice is changing. I see the world differently now. And this is what National Geographic specializes in, exposing people to new and amazing things to change the way they understand the world. The mission of the National Geographic Society is research, conservation, and education, but I suspect most of us think of it as exploration. And when we think of exploration and explorers, we think of someone like Tommy Heinrich, who was the National Geographic photographer on the Lindblad expedition I went on. Tommy is originally from Argentina. He is a mountain climber. He has climbed Everest. He was the photographer on a National Geographic expedition to climb K2, the second highest mountain in the world. He has climbed all over Patagonia, all over the world. When it comes to being an explorer, he's the real deal. And he tells a story that illustrates an important point about what it means to be an explorer. In the spring of 2016, Tommy was the photographer on the first team from Argentina to ski to the North Pole. To get in shape, they trained for months in Argentina. The plan was to go to Svalbard and train in Arctic conditions for 10 days before going on to base camp. They actually ended up in Svalbard closer to 3 weeks. Base camp was located on ice. A crack had developed in the landing strip. The plane couldn't bring them in. It was touch and go. They didn't know if they could get to base camp. They did at the last minute, and from there, a helicopter took them to their starting point, 120 kilometers from the North Pole. It took them 12 days to ski that 120 kilometers, which is slightly less than 75 miles. They had to pull all their gear and equipment and provisions on sleds over polar ice. And polar ice, this isn't a flat groomed trail they were skiing on. They had to pull their sleds over pressure ridges where the ice heaves up to 5, 6 feet high, somewhere about my height. They had to negotiate crevasses, these long, deep, wide cracks that open up in the ice, sometimes overnight, so you never knew what was going to be from day to day. On the last day, it took them more than 3 hours to ski 800 yards because they were on thin ice. But they made it. They got to 90 degrees north. And Tommy had gone out a little bit ahead of the team just before they reached the North Pole. He was within sight. He was setting up his equipment so he could do some photography and filming. And he hears a helicopter in the distance. And the helicopter lands, and it's about 30 yards away from Tommy. The door opens, and out come 15 guys. And they put on skis, and they put on sleds, and they start skiing around the North Pole. And after about 15 minutes, they stop, they take the gear off, load up the helicopter, and away they go. And Tommy is standing there watching this, and when he tells this story, I can only imagine what his expression was when he was actually there, but when he tells the story, even now, his expression is, "Really?" When we look at this scene, we can tell, at least from the outside, who are the explorers and who are not. Helicopter guys, you didn't train, you didn't do the work, not explorers. Tommy, you're the explorer. And I would agree, but not because he goes on grueling expeditions. There is more to being an explorer than that. The metaphor of an iceberg helps us understand what it means to be an explorer. An iceberg has this above the surface part. And this above the surface part, it's beautiful, it's compelling. Believe me, when you see it, you'll say, wow, it's awe-inspiring. But icebergs also have this below the surface part. And this below the surface part is massive. In fact, it makes up most of the mass of the iceberg. It's just as beautiful, it's just as compelling, but it's hidden. In being an explorer, the above the surface part is being the National Geographic explorer or being the mountain climber. The below the surface part, the hidden part, it's having the explorer's approach to life, those habits of mind and practices, so you think and act like an explorer. And if you do not have this below the surface part, this mass, you're a helicopter guy. You're not an explorer. And if you do, this is the idea worth spreading. You are an explorer based on your approach to life. And it's not just me saying this. This is National Geographic saying this. National Geographic created a framework of the attributes of an explorer. They use it mainly with their educational outreach, which is how I learned about it. They developed it with input from experts in many fields, including their staff and above the surface types of explorers that they work with. When I first saw the framework, I felt this little click of recognition. The framework had outlined things I had started to do in my own life personally, not as an educator. I started to do these things mainly because I wanted to live a life that was more integrated with nature and the outdoors. And honestly, I wanted my life to be more interesting, at least to me. I didn't know that I was getting this explorer's approach to life, but I believe having this mindset is part of the reason I was selected as a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow. There are 4 habits of mind and practices that will get you having the explorer's approach in your own life. This is not an extensive list. There's more to being an explorer, but this is where you can start. They are: be active, observe and document what's around you, welcome experience, value the earth. Let's start with being active. Now, being physically active is technically not part of the framework, but the research tells us being physically active is an important part of being mentally active, which is part of the framework. And let's be real. When we think of explorers, we think of people outside doing things, not sitting there endlessly scrolling through their phones. There's a lot out there about being physically active, so all I will say is this. Dr. Joe McInnes was a speaker on the Lindblad expedition. He was the first man to scuba dive underneath the North Pole. He's done things regarding the Titanic, working with Bob Ballard. He is a vibrant, fascinating, above and below the surface type of explorer. He's also 80. You can be an explorer your entire life, and life is a long game. It's hard to catch up on physical activity in the second half. Those of you who are under the age of 40 in here, which is most of you. Observe and document what's around you, number 2. Observe just means pay attention with all your senses so that you really see the golden glow of these beautiful October afternoons we're having, and you feel the frosty bite of an autumn morning, and you smell the spiciness of fallen leaves, and you hear the whisper of the wind. Well, we're in South Dakota, so maybe it's the roar. And then you document it. You document it through journaling, a field journal, a nature journal, a phenology journal. Just carry a little notebook with you. Aldo Leopold was famous for doing that. If you don't know who Aldo Leopold is, look him up later. You will thank me for that. Pro tip, make sure your notebook has waterproof paper so you can take it outside. When paper gets wet, it gets thick. You'll learn that one the hard way if you don't. 2, Observe and document through taking pictures. Learn basic photography skills. If you're going to take pictures, they might as well be good, even if all you will ever use is your phone. This doesn't have to be expensive. And yes, you can use your phone. You can use your phone to upload your photos and notes to a social media account. However, set your account to private. Your work is first for you, not your friends and your followers, not right away. If you put your work out for public consumption too soon, you short-circuit the process that can take it from being popular to being good. Once you get your work as good as you know how to make it, then you put it out for your friends, your family, hashtag go explore it. Why? Because explorers are storytellers. Now, keep in mind, as a storyteller, you're the narrator. You're not the hero. If you make yourself the hero of the story, you're a helicopter guy. The hero of the explorer's story is the world. You tell its story through what you observe and document during your experiences. This brings us to our third point. Welcome experience, particularly if it's new and unfamiliar, even if it's new and unfamiliar only to you. Explorers look at the unknown and unfamiliar with curiosity, not suspicion, not fear. This is a universal hallmark of explorers. They want to experience and understand things, even if these things challenge them. They're willing to stretch, they're willing to change, they're willing to take risks, they're willing to be made uncomfortable. Once curiosity and welcoming experience become your habit of mind and practice, you will start to level up, and one day you will have an experience you never thought you would or could. Guaranteed. In my case, it's giving a TEDx talk. Did not think this was ever going to be a thing for me. And finally, value the earth. I say this not as some sort of feel-good, quasi-spiritual kind of thing, but rather a reminder. We, and by that I mean every single living person on the face of this earth, are made of carbon, of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, magnesium, calcium, potassium, the same elements that make up the soil, the water, the air. Every atom of every element that spins within us has come from the earth. And one day, all these elements will return to the earth and become part of something else: the soil, the water, the air. We are connected to the earth, and by extension, each other, in ways we rarely consider and barely comprehend. Once you start to do these things that explorers do, you will discover a beauty to the earth that goes beyond that which is pretty or scenic. You will learn its secrets. And I hope you will feel a sense of wonder, of awe, of connection, and most of all, responsibility, not just for the earth, but to it. A responsibility to the earth is doing the right thing based out of respect and relationship. I can't promise you, if you do these things, be active, observe and document what's around you, welcome experience, value and be responsible to the earth, that you will find yourself climbing a mountain or hiking through the jungle. But I can promise you, if these are your habits of mind, if this is your approach to life, you are an explorer. It's your world. Go explore it. Thank you.